for the second time because I feel like he has so much invaluable knowledge to share with us in the Turks and Caicos Islands. I'm always privileged to be able to have an opportunity to sit with him and just eat up all the information that he can provide to us. My guest today is one of my brokers. He's also a director with Provident Limited. He is well known in the Turks and Caicos Islands. He's a father. He's a grandfather. He's just a phenomenal person and a man that is full of history. When we talk about history that National Colony carries with it, of course, we're not Keller Williams. We think a lot about the man behind the scenes, and that's in the person of Bengt Soderqvist. Today, please help me welcome Mr. Bengt Soderqvist to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate.
Well, thank you for all those nice words.
Well, definitely those nice words are very fitting because you are all of those things. So I am going to get right into the conversation because there's lots that needs to be covered. And I know that you are a man of few words, and I would like to make sure you get all those words in. So tell me, how long have you been in real estate, and what brought you to the Turks and Caicos Islands?
Gosh, that's a big question, you know. You said we have 45 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if we start with how I came here, I didn't come here to sell real estate. I came here, took a job as a surveyor. Mm-hmm. And, take a couple of minutes if you want to know how that came about. I worked in Sweden, where I'm from, and I worked for a consulting engineering company. Uh-huh. And we had the company had gotten a job in Morocco, and so I was there working for 4 months in the spring of 1965, uh-huh. And very interesting. It was way out in nowhere in an oasis on the south side of the Atlas Mountains, and I think we were looking for oil for King Hassan II, and our company took care of the survey work. Anyway, another guy that worked on the same job, when we were done, he and I had vacation time, so we decided to change our flights. Instead of flying straight back to Sweden, we stopped in Spain, spent about a little more than a week, I think, rented a car and drove up and down on the East Coast to Costa del Sol and Costa de Brava and all that. And somewhere there I found a Swedish newspaper in a restaurant that was run by some Swedes, a lot of Swedes there in the summer. So there was an ad about the survey job in the Bahamas. To me, Bahamas was somewhere off Florida where there was a lot of palm trees and warm water. That's all I knew about Bahamas. But the paper was very old, so the applicants were too late to apply for this job. So, you tuck it away in the back of the head like that could have been an interesting thing. So then later on that fall, back working in Sweden, there was a weekly magazine, and they had a big picture, and there was a lot of people that bought property sight unseen on an island named Great Exuma in the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, gosh, they got to have something to do with that ad about the surveyor, because I remember the name Great Exuma. So I contacted the people that was peddling property, mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, it's the same outfit. He said, and somebody actually took the job, and now I want him to fly down with us, but I can't find him. I think he changed his mind and he's hiding from me. He said, I don't know if they were lying, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. But anyway, so he asked if let's find out what we are talking about, you know. So I had to give them my qualifications, and I had to check out what was expected and all that. So So a couple of months later, I was in great excitement. There was, I think, the last day in November '65, and I was working there for 6 months. During that time, I met Fritz Luddington.
Okay, famous Fritz Luddington,
Yeah,
yes.
and he had started looking at another place because he had the Two Turtles in Georgetown, and so he had figured out that he was going to try to do something in Turks and Caicos,
Okay.
and which of course I didn't have a clue where Turks and Caicos were, but anyway, so when he was ready and had enough assurance from the government here on the lease purchase deal, I just switched over and started working with him. And so Fritz and Tommy Coleman and myself, we came down here in October 1966. And so, you know, now I was hired as a surveyor. Well, you know, everything was very primitive here, so the job description was you had to do whatever was needed, you know, but my main thing was to do survey work. Yeah.
Okay, so basically your journey started off supposed to be a job in the Bahamas, then you met Fritz Luddington, and then you ended up in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And you basically are saying to us that you came here as a surveyor, and that was your task.
Yeah, I was hired to do that, you know.
Okay, because you know, a lot of people are of the impression, I guess, that you are Provident Limited standing on its own, but your responsibility was coming here as a surveyor.
That's how it started, yeah. And then you know, because at that time the government didn't even have a survey office, you know. I had to measure up that area that Fritz had made a lease purchase deal with, and then of course do the planning where the roads were going to go and all that. So I became a town planner, and you know,
a man of many hats.
Well, you know, you had to do just about everything in the early days, and so I think your original question was what real estate, you know. So that took several years before I really got into that, because in the beginning, Fritz had made a deal with a realtor in Florida named Ford Carter, because he had been selling property in the Bahamas. So and basically what he did in those days, to put his maps together, advertised it, and people bought it sight unseen, you know. And so Ford was selling property up in Florida, and now and then somebody came down to see what they had bought. So, because now I was the only one that could find it for them, you know. So I probably started, you know, I wasn't selling, but I had to show people what they had bought. And we also had a deal in those early days. Because when people just buy it from a map, you know, it's hard to know exactly what they're going to look like. When they actually came down, then they realized, well, I would rather be over in that part, you know.
Right.
So I think the agreement was that if people come down and inspected what they had bought sight unseen within 2 years, then they could swap to another lot, you know, and use the equity they had put on that one, and trade up or equal value or whatever.
Right. Before you get any further into that, I just want to be clear, because you were talking about being here from 1966, and we're going to get into a lot of that, but I also wanted to know just a little bit about, because development is a part of all of this as well. We're going to get into the development question. You know, I mean, how was the island back then, you would say, compared to how it is now? Just to understand a little bit about that first.
Well, you know, there was the 3 villages, Blue Hills, 5 Keys, and the Bight. And the way we knew that people were from the Bight was because they had black teeth. because they were using the well water,
Okay.
the Kingston well, and there was too much. Well, for one thing, there was sulfur smell in the water.
In the water.
And also there was too much fluoride, and I guess you have too much fluoride, especially if the people, when they were born here and had it as babies, their teeth turn black, and so that immediately you knew if somebody was from the bite or from the other places. But there was footpaths between the three villages. People used kerosene lamps for light, and they were cooking on charcoal. Either they had their own little charcoal going back in the woods, in the bushes, or they got charcoal from Haiti.
Okay.
And normally they did the cooking outside their house, behind, and the kids in the bite, they had to walk all the way to Blue Hills to go to school. So in those days, where Turtle Cove Marina is,
yes,
there was Sellers Pond. There was like a causeway through Sellers Pond. There was part of the footpath between the bite and Blue Hills. And in the summer, especially at low tide with the offshore wind, then they could probably walk in the shallow water below the cliffs in front of the mountain. But in the winter, when the waves were splashing in, then the footpath was on top of the cliff. So where you see all those fancy houses now, that's where the footpath was. So especially with the kids in the bite, they had to get up early because normally the kids have to go to the well and get water before they took off for school. I remember one time, probably 2-3 weeks, I actually lived in the government rest house down in Blue Hills. The one, I don't know if you know where that one is. It's right where the jetty is today.
yes.
And
That's the old clinic, Blue Hills Clinic.
yes. Yeah. And I lived there because Tommy normally we lived on the boat, but Tommy had to go back and get some more supplies. So he sailed off with my home. So I was, at that time, I was 100% of the white population on Providenciales because, Tommy was gone. And then I lived down there, and that was next to the water tank. So that's how you woke up in the morning, was when the kids start coming down to get the water, But of course, if you lived in Blue Hills, it was easier for them because the school was right there. But there was, I was told there was 450 people in the three villages together. I don't know if that was correct, but there was very small population.
Right.
It's
a very small population.
But everybody was very nice, and they. I think people in general really wanted this. They were happy that we were there and started something, because we started hiring people. In the 60s, a lot of the male population went to Freeport and earned money. So now they had a chance to stay home, and earn some money. And Ray Ward started building the Third Turtle Inn. I think he arrived in February 1967, and he hired a lot of people, so.
Right. So I mean, what you're saying is, I wanted people to understand how long you have been in the Turks and Caicos Islands, so that to also understand, where you came from to where you are now, and the part that you have also played in the history making and also the real estate history making of the Turks and Caicos Islands. And with that said, I would like for you to explain to us what part and what role did Provident Limited play in the real estate industry and the development of the Turks and Caicos Islands? Because this is always a hot button topic, that is asked, and it's good to have the clarification of how Provident Limited, of course, got involved and what part they played.
Well, as I said, there was a lease purchase deal.
Yes.
And I think Fritz Luddington's original idea was just because he had some investors, that people they met on Great Exuma that spent their winters down there. There was some people from the States with some serious money. There was Kip DuPont and Teddy Roosevelt, who was actually the grandson of President Theodore. Rogers Morton was, at that time, he was a congressman from Maryland.
Okay.
Later on became Secretary of Interior under Nixon. He actually sold his shares when he became in the government. He sold it to Dick DuPont, which was Kippy's cousin. I guess that was back in the days when you had honest politicians, So I guess Rogers figured he wanted to.
Did you just say that? Go ahead. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
He probably didn't think it was a good idea to have an offshore investment and be Secretary of Interior at the same time. I don't know if the U.S. politician thinks like that nowadays, but at least Rogers Morton did. That's what I meant. And let's see, then he had a friend named Peter Thompson. This group of people were actually the ones that were named the Seven Dwarfs. Okay. You probably heard about that. Tommy Coleman was one of the Seven Dwarfs, but he didn't have any money to invest. And then there was Mrs. Barber, which was Fritz Luddington's mother. She had invested in the project. Okay, now I forgot the question.
We were talking about the role that Provident Limited played. Yeah. Yes.
So anyway, these people, I never saw a real agreement. I think Fritz said, well, I found this place down the line in Turks and Caicos, and I want to do something down there. Well, if you come up with something, we'll put in some money. That was probably all they agreed on, in a handshake deal. And so the original idea was, because they were all private pilots, to build an airport and then have a small inn, like the Two Turtles Inn that they already had. And, like more or less like a small private little hideaway, and then have a little extra land that they could sell to their friends and associates to make ends meet. So when Fritz first, he put together a proposal, and that was in 1966 in the spring. I remember when Paula Fountain, who was the manager, Two Turtles Inn, she was sitting typing up this proposal. It was back in the days with typewriters. And you had to have carbon papers if you're going to have copies,
Let me say, you that old carbon paper? Go ahead.
You guys don't even know how to spell it, But so anyway, so Fritz went down to Grand Turk with this thing. And I understand that there was because the administrator, it was before we had governors, so they were named administrators.
Yes.
Appointed from England. There was Tony Golding. But he was out here to try to get some tourism going.
Okay.
Because, the sisal industry was gone. Once we started using nylon rope, we didn't need any hand ropes any longer. The salt industry was taping off. So at that time, Bahamas started having a little tourism. You don't remember it, but there was a James Bond movie that was played there, Thunderbolt, I think it was. So I think Bahamas got a lot of free advertising through that one.
Okay.
So I think the Foreign Office in London probably thought, well, they got some tourism in Bahamas. Maybe we can do that in Turks and Caicos. So they sent out Tony Golding to try to get something going. And the reason why he got the job, he had been a civil servant all his life. And his appointment before that had been in Africa. I think it was Tanzania nowadays, it was Tanzania in those days.
Right.
And he had started tourism there. So they said, well, let's send out Tony and see if we can get something going. And there was actually one proposal, and I've seen the draft of it by Lem McGuire. He was, I don't know if you heard that name.
Yes, definitely.
He had Admiral's Arms. He was actually, his backers was a couple of people from Sarasota in Florida. But nothing ever happened with that deal. Mm-hmm. So now came Fritz. So he had that proposal he did, I think it was for 2,000 acres. Mm-hmm. And, do certain things and, airport and all that stuff. So the government actually said, well, if you commit to do some more infrastructure, we can make some more land available on the lease purchase deal. So eventually they got heads of agreement together on 4,000 acres. Provident Limited had 5 years to pay lease on the land, and during those 5 years there was certain infrastructure that had to be done. And when that was done, Provident would have earned the right to buy the land and get freehold title. So there was, and the main thing in the proposal was we were supposed to build a 4,000 feet runway that was going to be outside the 4,000 acres. The government was going to pick a location, and there was I think they named it a guest house or guest accommodation with 10 rooms, and they was going to spend a minimum amount of money. I think it was pound sterling in those days, but it was a very small amount. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that the third Turtle Inn probably cost 10 times what the minimum stipulation was. Then we were supposed to build roads between the three settlements. One thing was a jetty in 5 Keys. Later on we realized that it was a bad location, so that one was swapped and became South Dock instead, because there was a better location where boats with more draft could come all the way into shore, Right. 5 Keys, you can't come in, there's too shallow water. And a few more things. Employ so many people for so many years or whatever, I think it was 5 years. So by 1971...
Before you go any further, because I just have a quick question. Based on what you have said, someone asked, did Provident officially pay off the debt that they were supposed to pay?
Yeah, by 1971, and I have those documents in the archives, that's when the bulk of land was transferred from the Crown to Provident Limited. So at that time, the administrator was Robin Winwright. Mm-hmm. So he signed the transfer, and so I guess the government at the time took the list of what we were supposed to do. The airport is there. They've done that, and so we had earned the right to buy it. So at that time, I think if I remember right, I think we owed a couple of years of lease payment, and then now the amount of acres. I think we still have like 40 acres coming. I think it was a little shy of it, but anyway, with the preset price per acre, so there was a substantial amount that was going to be paid. And I remember that Fritz had been over and met with Robin Wainwright in Grand Turk, and Fritz came back to me. He said Robin said that, you're going to give us all this money, and I have to send it over to England and we're never going to see anything of it, because it goes in the big pot in England.
Right.
So he said the only way we can get some use of it if we can come up with some work that you guys can do, so that we can have use for. Well, this is 1971, the government relief work was still going. They were building a few stone walls here and there, so what can you do? And they'd been talking about it, and they hadn't really come up with anything. So I actually told Fritz, I said, well, the government have at least 10,000 acres of crown land in the western side of Provinciales. And so sooner or later, something probably going to happen out there. But it took many years.
Right.
So anyway, so I said, well, and the road that goes west is the Bay Road in front of Blue Hills. So I said, you don't want to have that road as a heavy traffic road, because too many kids and dogs and chicken running on that road, So that would be the wrong place to have an access road to the western side. So why don't you suggest to Robin Wainwright that we build a road inland from Blue Hills? So I guess they thought that was a good idea. So that was part of the deal, and that's what now is the Millennium Highway, because that's the, like a bypass road. So we actually built that, so that way the government could pay Providence that. So that was part of the payment. So now they got some use for part of the payment that we did, and the rest, I guess, they had to send to England. But that road, I remember Junior Rigby was on the bulldozer at the time when we built that one. And I think for the first 15 years, hardly anybody ever used it, because there wasn't needed.
Right.
But now it shows there was a good move.
Right. So basically, Providence has actually fulfilled many of those things that were on the list of things that needed to be provided for them in exchange for what was given by the government, right?
Yeah, that was done in 1971.
Okay, cool. So, just getting a little bit, again, talking about the past, and we're going to move in the future, come up current in a minute. You started to talk about some of the transactions that were done where people were buying sight unseen, etc. In today's world, we need attorneys to help us with these transactions that were happening. Tell me a little about what attorneys needed back then, and I definitely want you to tell a listening audience about the story where you actually sold land in exchange for ice cream, because it's just like, just to give them an idea about how real estate transactions were done in those days.
Yeah, as I said, we had Ford Carter, this realtor in Florida, so he had we were still back in the typewriter time, so we just had a sales agreement in triplicate, white, pink, and then yellow, I think it was, and that's where people, signed on that one and then bought a piece of land.
That was it.
Yeah, and
Carbon copy.
So a lot of people bought it on terms. I think it was 1% down payment and 1% a month. And we actually started as early as 1968. And the 1 acre lots in Long Bay, the cheapest one was $600.
Oh my gosh. Can I buy one of those now?
and the 2 acre beachfront lots, I think we started at 11,000, and then we raised them to 16,000. And now I think there are a lot of people that made the big money. I mean, what we did, we to get things going, we had to sell a bunch of the good inventory to get going. People that timed it right, built it and then hang on to it for a few years, did some easy money by just flipping. I think the most we ever got for a 2 acre in Grace Bay was 110,000. I don't know how many millions you get now. I mean, anyway.
Right.
But that normally. Somebody told me once, when you are in pioneer like this, you wind up selling your worst inventory last for the most money, because you have to use the good stuff to get things going.
Yes.
So anyway, and another thing that was kind of interesting, the first tourists that came were mostly lot owners, because there was no regular flights down here. We used to have, the people that had bought property, some were private pilots, so they probably flew down and take a look at what they had bought sometime. We also had an office in Lantana, which is at West Palm Beach in Florida. So we had a Beach 18, which is a 10-seater. So that one was flying down here every Thursday and Sunday. And very often in the winter, just about all the people that came down were already lot owners. So they actually became the first tourists.
And sorry, I know I asked you another question, which I do want to hear about the ice cream transaction. But because you're talking about these lot owners who came down, do you feel like are some of these same, they may not be alive, but some of these same properties are still being sold today? I mean, like for the first time since they originally bought them. Do you think you have a lot of those original owners or owners who still have properties out there that are being sold today?
No, I think very, very few. There was, I probably told you, I looked at our inventory list one time, and I saw there was some lots in Long Bay that still had the Swedish name on them, because Fort Carter actually had an agent in Stockholm. So people had bought sight unseen there. Some people have never came down here. Some of them may even be hiding money, and then bought something in the tax haven. So I started contacting some of these, and several of them had already passed away, and I managed to track down some relatives. So I remember 2 sisters that I got hold of. They didn't have a clue that Dad had a piece of land there. So I felt like Santa Claus, because he had paid $600-700 back in the early 70s, and now they got about 300,000 to split.
And that was recently
to split between them. Yeah.
Right. So there are just probably 1 or 2, but not many.
Yeah.
Right.
But you wouldn't find many of those any longer. No.
Okay. So now tell me about this ice cream transaction.
Well. Did you ever hear about Simmons store?
Yes.
Yeah, there was before Butterfield store. I know Butterfield store opened in 75, so Simmons must have opened in the early 70s. Was a family from Texas that had come down here as tourists, and I guess liked it and decided to come back, and then opened this store. Later on, it became Vic Georgiev's store, right at the roundabout where you turn to go to the airport. And so in those days, I mean, you didn't travel with any cash with you. There was nothing to buy anyway except at Simmons store. So now and then I used to stop in there and have an ice cream. Of course, I had no money, so Ron or Herb, they were the 2 brothers, they had a little list, in the cash register, they marked it down, and probably every other month or so, I went down there and settled with them. So Herb and Ron had bought a piece of land from teacher Howell, Clement Howell, up in the mountain.
Okay.
And then they decided to split it in half because, there were two brothers. I think so they got roughly 2 acres each. So after they had done that, they realized that one half didn't have an access to the road. I don't know how they got approval to do it, but they did. And I had some land next to that. And the lot that was next to them came down like a little wedge like that. It was like a tip, so it was kind of useless to me because it was, very, very narrow. It can't come out to nothing. But that would, if I cut off the tip of that triangle, they would get access to the second lot.
Right.
So that would be worth a lot to them, useless to me. So we talked. Oh yeah, no, we can work something out. Said, well, what do you want for it? Well, they give you access. But we've got to be worth a lot. We kept on joking about it. So anyway, at the end of the day, I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 150 feet frontage or whatever it was.
Right.
And I'll, I can stop by and have an ice cream in the store, whenever I feel like it, for a year.
For a year.
So said deal. They said I couldn't bring the whole school, bunch of kids from the school with me, and that was for me personally. So I said, okay. So anyway, Jim Wright was the registrar.
Registrar of Lands?
Yeah. He was at that time the chief land surveyor and the registrar was the same person. Because it was very small volume for the registrar. Actually, he was surveyor most of the week, and on Thursdays he was registrar. That's how the deal, what they were doing. So I asked him, yeah, you can put on anything, peppercorn or whatever. So actually we have a registered land transfer where it spells out 1 year of free ice cream, So
actually a legal document has that on it in the land registry system in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Yep, that's, the consideration so many dollars instead of that, if you do it in family, because of
$25.
Yeah. So
do you have a copy of that still? Just curious.
I have to get another one because I am going to write the book. I'm working on it. And
you're writing a book. How far is this book from being completed?
Well, I'm too slow. But anyway, I'm still young though. But anyway, I did get the copy. Because Alice Williams dug one out for me, and I know I have it in the office. But you know what my office looked like, so I haven't been able to see it lately.
Since then.
I may have to go back to the land registry and ask them to go back in the archives, because now that parcel doesn't exist any longer, so it's a dormant one because they've been combined and remutated and all that kind of stuff.
But it would just have been so good to see that it actually existed.
Yeah. No, I have to do that.
Okay, so I just want to pause for a moment just to again, for those who are listening, just to let you know I'm having a conversation with Bengt Soderqvist. Of course, I'm thanking you for all the comments and questions that is coming through as we talk about real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. We are pressed for time, but we do have a few more questions, and if you have a question or comment, please put it in and we'll see if we can get the opportunity to ask and answer them. I'm just talking about questions. I'm just looking at my feed and I see that there is a question for you, Bengt, as saying that looking at today's market, would you say that the real estate process has changed significantly over the years? What do you say to a question like that?
Yeah, because it has, it was very simple in the early days. Now, you have a whole a bunch of pages, in most of the closings. When we started, Finbar Dempsey was the magistrate, the government magistrate, but when his second term was up as magistrate, he decided to stay here and open, private practice. I don't know really, but I assume that he and Fritz probably talked about it, and Fritz probably made some kind of arrangement that he was on a retainer, was going to take care of all the legal stuff for Providence. That's probably one reason why he stayed. But for years he was the only attorney here. Then eventually we got Claes Getfeldt, he's the Canadian, which now is Twas Getfeldt, and
Yes.
and then Ian Miller, I think, came up from Cayman, if I remember right. So eventually we got more. But for instance, nowadays, you need road easements. We never worried about road easements in the early days. I mean, if you subdivide land and build the roads, you can get to the lots. I mean, common sense says, of course, you're going to drive on it, I mean,
Right.
Today it looked like we need more paper than gravel to drive on it. But at the same time now, things are, we have computers and things works easier. So I mean, it's good, I think, to have legal easements and so on. I mean, maybe some things were pretty loosey-goosey in the early days.
Do you feel like that's why some easements may not be registered on some titles because of back then they weren't registered?
Yeah, I think it was probably, I would say, late 70s into the 80s before it got common that actually have road easements.
Okay. So everybody knows Bengt Soderqvist as being the land specialist. Do you still get that excitement when you are, I know you may not be in the field as much, but I know you're still actively selling real estate where possible. Do you still get excitement from selling land parcels versus anything else?
Well, I guess I like what I do. But one thing have changed. I don't have a machete in the trunk of my car any longer. So that's one thing that changed. Probably today, the police probably pick you up if you have a machete. I mean that's one thing that kind of worrisome is the crime thing. I mean we built the third turtle, and eventually, I mean there was like a working camp. That's where we stayed, especially in the summer because we didn't have any tourists. But in the winter, there was sometimes. So year after year, it became more and more hotel and less working camp. But I think it was like 1973, 74. I remember because I told you about this charter flight coming in. There was a very hectic time for the manager, and I think Donna Bartram was actually the manager at this time. And people were checking out, people checking in. So some lady from New York had come, and one of the guys was taking her suitcase up to the room. So she asked Donna for the key. And I remember I was standing there because I was kind of helping them. And Donna looked at me. She said, "Do we have any keys?" She said. So you couldn't lock the hotel rooms. We didn't have keys to the hotel rooms. But that's a big difference.
How it was then?
I think that was 1973.
Okay.
Great.
So everybody looks at you again, like I said, being the guru in real estate. What type of advice would you give to, in this day and time to the new generation who is up and coming and looking to get into the field of real estate? What type of advice would you give to them?
I don't think I'm a typical real estate salesman. I mean, I don't think I could sell condos, and then tell people, well, you should have this refrigerator instead of that one, but the land, and I think with surveying background is probably good because then you're not going to show the wrong piece of land because that's your business,
Right.
surveying, and then the same thing with contour maps, trying to explain, where the best building site is and so on. So I think for anybody that get into the field, I think to learn and know as much as possible of the product, so they can pass it along to the clients. I think is important.
Talking about not showing the wrong property, how do you avoid that as a real estate agent? What tools do you have or should have in order to avoid doing something like that, showing the wrong property? Because it's an art, and so I'm just trying to understand, what do you do? How do you ensure that?
Well, I guess you have to. All this map reading comes so natural to me, but I guess that probably doesn't to everybody. I guess you have to, probably make sure you learn it, and if you're in doubt, ask, call me.
Call Bengt Soderqvist. No, but I like what you're talking about. The map reading is so imperative that people actually learn to read the maps that are out there and available. And if you don't have those maps, to get a hold of the maps. One of the things I am really grateful for is that at National Colony Realty, yes, this is a number at National Colony or Keller Williams, but I'm just really grateful that we were able to have your guidance in terms of teaching us how to actually read maps and how to know which maps to order and what is so important. Maps are important in being able to pinpoint the exact location of certain properties. And even being able to just stand on an actual lot and be able to do the distance measurements, all of these things that come into play to be able to decipher the exact location of the property and to be able to read surveys and surveys and understand surveys and the contours, and all of this is just a part of real estate. So you are correct in that your maps are very important, and also aligning yourself with individuals who can teach you these things hands-on, that you won't make a mistake like showing the wrong property.
Yeah, I think in general, know your facts, so you can pass it on to the client. I think it's important. Same thing comes with like when people buy a house or a condo, part as an investment or keep on renting it out. You make sure you have the statistics. What is the rental income for that? What are the expenses? So you can show in black and white. This is what you can expect to make on your investment. Just have your facts straight. That's I think is the main thing.
Okay. I have two last questions. What is the formula to success in this real estate business? What would you think from your perspective?
The
formula for a successful career in real estate. What would you say?
Well, I guess you have to be lucky and time it right. I mean, right now, when it's boom time, I mean, how can you go wrong?
So with that said, do you think that the market in the Turks and Caicos is still a very good market to invest in?
Well, I mean, it looks like right now, I mean, we are supply and demand. I think we have more buyers than inventory at this time. I mean, it's really a seller's market right now. We've been going through so many ups and downs here. You remember when the housing market went bust in the States 2009 and so on, we had a few tough years there, that's when people were looking for the bargains, but I mean that's not the situation today,
Right. And my last question for you, have you ever thought about retiring, or does the love for being out there and among the land just keeps you going?
I've been thinking of retiring for 20 years. I think. Now I have actually taken it out of overdrive. I'm taking more time off now, and I am slowly, retiring from Provident.
Okay.
Because we have new generations coming into the company now, but I still enjoy what I'm doing. So I don't think I ever going to be 100% retired.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I actually enjoy you being my broker, and I enjoy every day that I can pick up the phone and call you and say, Bengt, how do I do this? It's because every day is a learning experience, and I still believe that you have lots of knowledge that you can share with us as agents in the Turks and Caicos Islands generally, not just with KW Turks and Caicos, but all agents. And I know there are a number of brokerages that come and they depend on you and look for advice and guidance for you in the real estate industry. And I will say that it's an honor to be able to have a person that's down to earth like you to be able to pick up the phone and call. Sometimes there are people who, have so much knowledge and you don't know how to approach them. I feel that you are approachable and you have actually shared your knowledge with so many people on this island without even thinking twice about it. And I think that really stands out about you. And so me asking you about retiring, it doesn't mean I want you to retire because I don't want you to not be my source of help when I need that help. So I just want to say to you, I appreciate you. If I've never told you before, I'm telling you in public, I do appreciate you, Bengt. And I know I talk about you a lot in my office, but it's because you have really taught me a lot that I have learned since I've become a real estate agent with National Colony Realty and now Keller Williams. And I think I'm now a team leader and I'm able to go out on the field and teach my agents. And I think a lot of that is because of what I have learned from you. Yes, we have our own training program in-house, but there's nothing like when you can have hands-on training from someone who knows the field and who's able to pass that on. So I do appreciate you. If I've never told you before, I appreciate you, Bengt.
You told me before, and you are a good listener, and thanks again for the kind words. Twice today.
Twice today. With that said, I want to say a special thank you to all of you who have tuned into Let's Talk TCI Real Estate today. It was a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you for Bengt Soderqvist being a part of the show. I also want to say to you, please tune in next week. I will have another guest on. We're going to be talking about some of the new developments that are currently now happening in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So today was an opportunity to talk about some of the history, where the country came from, where real estate has come from. And next week, we're going to be talking about some of the new developments in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So until next time, I would like to say to you, stay safe and remain blessed. Have a very, very good evening.